Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is David from Citizens Are Not Slaves. I'm coming at you today with a video. This is a police officer arresting a young man in front of a school. It's not really clear why the arrest is taking place, but it's been going around on Twitter, and people have opinions on this. And I think that this video is something of a Rorschach test, right? A Rorschach test. This is all you see is the altercation afterwards. You don't necessarily see what the reason for it. So some people kind of assume that the police officer is right. Some people kind of assume that the kid is right. But nobody really knows at this point what this was about. Now, let me go ahead and show you the video. This is he's walking. The guy with the camera is walking up here. You see that this is already in progress. The police officer has the wrist of the young man. The police officer is grabbing him and throwing him to the ground. And he's going to arrest him. He's going to put handcuffs on him. And another officer is about to step in and help out real quick. And there he is yelling, screaming some profanities. That's absolutely happening. And what else? Get some kids walking by. Looks like they were at school, and who knows what's going on here. The video ends shortly after the other police officer shows up. There we go. So I'm going to switch back. All right. So there's a couple things to point out here, and that is a police officer in the United States has to have a reason to arrest you. In other words, he can't just decide to arrest you for no reason. There are standards, legal standards. Be it, I'm not really sure. I mix this up, whether it's articulable suspicion or probable cause. I think it's probable cause for arrest. Articulable suspicion for detention and investigation. But the point is, you have to have something. You can't just be like, hey, I'm just going to arrest you for no reason. That has actually been illegal since the Magna Carta. Yeah, as a matter of fact. So it's been an understood principle of law that you cannot be arrested without a reason since the Magna Carta. That is a fundamental, foundational truism of our representative republic. So we know that has to be the case, right? Now that means if the young man committed a crime for which you can be arrested, then the police officer is legitimately capable of making that arrest. However, if no crime has been committed, then the police officer would be wrong in trying to take this young man into custody. We've seen enough videos to see that both things happen, right? So both citizens are wrong, and then we also see where police officers are wrong. This is very interesting because there's a certain political divide that people on the left seem to kind of go for citizens' rights. And even though I'm on the right, I will tell you that I usually bias towards the citizens' rights. But for some reason, people on the right seem to kind of bias towards the authority of the government, which is very interesting because that seems contrary to the Constitution to me. However, we have another situation where it seems like everybody's flipped, and that is the investigation of Trump over the last 2 years. So we know that Trump basically did not collude at all with the Russians. We know that to be the case now. We know that his campaign may have tried to have contact with people who were Russian, but that doesn't mean that they were working with the Russian government in order to subvert our election. Now, we also know that the Russian government was attempting to subvert our election to some degree. I mean, they weren't trying to stop it from happening. They weren't really trying to change the outcome. They were just trying to make us all mad at each other. Mission accomplished, by the way. But the Russians have done this, albeit not this effectively, for every election cycle as far back as we can go. Now, they've kind of gone on the radar. They've done whatever they could do. They didn't get recognized as Russian agents. So there's a lot of things that can happen and have happened in the past that we didn't necessarily become this aware of. But now we're definitely aware of the fact that Russians have, the Russian government has actually had people do things in our elections that we would rather they not do. Things that are illegal, tampering. Mostly it was media related, right? So it was social media based, quote unquote, tampering with the elections. The important thing here is to understand that the president and the campaign, and this is the campaign for president for the party that is opposite the party in power, was investigated, was spied upon. They had phones tapped. They had, it's not clear whether or not they had a human asset put in place, but it was clear that they basically spied on these people. And then, and this was based off of a known fake Russian dossier, right? The FBI knew that this was fake, knew that this wasn't real, and they still went and got FISA warrants based on the fake dossier. And then they pursued this nonsense and investigated the campaign and Trump himself for 2 years. Now, this is a really this is unprecedented in our politics for the executive branch, for the FBI to really have tried to investigate the leader of the executive branch, the president of the United States. A lot of people have said, the president is not above the law. And you're right, the president is not above the law. And if the president commits a crime, it is a crime. However, the president is above the FBI. And the FBI cannot investigate, indict, or charge, or anything. Cannot do any of those things to the president of the United States because the president has absolute authority over the executive branch. That is why there is a process listed for impeachment, and that process is specifically for the president and judges and cabinet members, people in high office, people with authority, right? So the idea is that if you can't bring normal proceedings against somebody with authority, then you have to have an extra ordinary proceeding, and that would be impeachment. It was a wise thing to have in the Constitution. We need it. It's definitely a mechanism that has to exist. And it has to exist because everything that the FBI did when they were investigating the president was unconstitutional. And even if he wasn't the president, it would have been unlawful because there was no actual basis for their actions. They knew for a fact that the dossier that kicked this whole thing off was fake. They knew for a fact that they were lying to obtain the warrants. They knew for a fact that what they were doing was wrong. And I think that's really what it gets down to here. Now, it's interesting that we have really the two sides kind of flip on these issues, right? So on the one side, they'll basically look at this kid who's getting arrested by a police officer and say the officer is harassing him unlawfully. There's no reason to do that. And truthfully, you don't see a reason. So, we don't know what the reason is he's doing that. And they would say, oh, that's wrong. But then they look at, well, Trump should definitely be investigated because, he's evil. And nobody's above the law, so investigate him. But that's actually also true of the investigators. The investigators are also not above the law. So why were they pursuing an investigation that seems an awful lot like a coup, from where I'm sitting, against a sitting president on false information, on information that they knew to be false? That's a really sticky question, and that is what Barr is currently investigating. And I'm hoping that he finds exactly what he's looking for, as in who's responsible, why they did it, and so forth. Now, if they can answer those questions, and right now it really doesn't look like they can, but if they can answer those questions, then fine. Answer the questions. However, Barr has stated that the questions he's asked so far have not been answered satisfactorily, and he is asking the right questions. He actually, I saw an interview with him on YouTube not too long ago, and he was asking the right questions. Why are you investigating the president of the United States? So, and then on the Republican side, you basically have the flip of all this, right? You have the people who understand like the deep state is going after the president and violating the rights of the president and campaign members and all of those people. And yet they don't seem to understand, if they see a situation like this, they assume that a police officer has a reason to arrest. I don't like to make assumptions at all. I do it, but I don't like to do it, right? So what I'm thinking is that you have to actually figure out what the reason is. Before you can say, oh, that's 100% justified, you have to know why they were trying to do that. Before you can say it was completely unjustified, you have to know why they were trying to do it. So for a police officer, you have to have evidence, right? And here's the other thing that kind of bothers me about the current court situation. And this is something that we kind of know. There's something called effervescent evidence, right? And that's where a police officer says, I think I smell marijuana, right? And they use that as the basis for a search. That's very problematic. So, for instance, what they could do is they could say that they smell marijuana, use that as a basis for a search, perform a destructive search of, let's say, your vehicle, where they rip up your seats and all that kind of stuff, and then when they don't find anything, just send you on your way. If they do find something, of course, they'll take you to court and or take you to press charges and put you through the system. And at that point, well, they found something, so of course they probably really did smell it, right? But then if they don't find anything, you don't go through the court system, the judges never see that. So becomes a confirmation bias where the courts believe effervescent evidence is more likely than not legitimate. And I think that's problematic from a citizen's rights standpoint. So what I would like to see as far as the one case is if in court you have to actually demonstrate that you had probable cause for a search. You actually have to be able to show the evidence or the thing, and there are electronic sniffers out there now, right? I mean, we could arm every police officer in America with an electronic sniffer that would smell marijuana, and yet we don't, right? Now, that would result in false positives, but fewer false positives than if the police officer themselves is just doing it, right? Because at that point, the police officer can just lie. If it's a machine, then the machine can have a false positive, but the machine at least won't lie per se. I mean, you can fool a machine, like a police officer could have a bag of marijuana, put it up to the machine and be like, oh, the machine smells marijuana. And then we'd have to have people who were, proficient in figuring out whether or not the scent was too strong for the machine, like if the machine gets a huge signal or something like that. Anyway, point is, we need to get back to the point where individuals are innocent until proven guilty, and that is both the citizens and somebody like Trump. Right now, there's this huge debate going around. It's pretty clear that he didn't collude. It's pretty clear that there was no reason at all for them to investigate him. However, there is still, for some reason, a bunch of people running around saying that impeachment is an appropriate resolution for this because they feel like Trump tried to obstruct an investigation. Now, again, as with this kid, if that investigation shouldn't have happened at all, Trump had the absolute authority to shut it down. And he should have shut it down. Probably about a year and 11 months ago. Because this was detrimental. This has been detrimental to our nation and the function of government for the last 2 years and some odd months. This is not how government is supposed to run. This is not how our government is designed. It is not designed to have the deep state or members of the FBI investigating the President of the United States. The President of the United States is the leader of the FBI. He's the leader of the executive branch. He is the top law enforcement officer in the country. A lot of people have been saying that the Attorney General is the top law enforcement officer in the nation, but that is not the case. the president himself is the top law enforcement officer of the nation. He is the it would be like saying that the Secretary of Defense is the commander-in-chief, right? It's not. The president's the commander-in-chief. The president is the leader of the executive branch, and he is the leader of every executive branch function. And he gets to determine how those functions are going to be carried out. This was inappropriate. And mostly, I'm saying that because there was no basis for it. But in addition, I'm saying that because the president is the leader of the executive branch, and it is absolutely an act of, rebellion, insubordination for the executive branch to think that they can investigate the president of the United States. So that's what I think, and I think that we need to start to really kind of figure out where we fall on some of these constitutional issues. What is a citizen's right, and how much can the government investigate before that investigation becomes harassment when they have absolutely no basis for it? And I think that's something that we really need to start socializing. We need to start getting to the point where we tell our judges that that's not acceptable, and they need to rein in police officers when they're doing that, and that we simply require evidence, a demonstration of a fact, when a police officer is going to take one of these, take an action. I mean, it's that simple. Instead of just acting on impulse and going out and just doing whatever you want, collect the evidence, make sure that you have a way of demonstrating that the thing that you were doing had some basis in reality, and then take your action. Just like the FBI needed to have a basis in reality for that 2-year investigation that cost us some odd millions of dollars, and it seems like they didn't at this point. And this is not really speculation that they didn't. We know for a fact that the Steele dossier, which is the item that they pointed to, and they pointed to that at the FISA court, they pointed to that everywhere. We know it's fake. We know that it was basically a fabrication. And now we know that the FBI knew that when they were getting the warrants. I think that's a huge deal. The fact that the FBI knew that the thing that they were doing their investigation based on was fake, and they chose to move forward anyway. One of the things investigators like to say is that they go where the facts lead them. But in this case, they did not go where the facts lead them, because if they'd gone where the facts led them to go, they would have shut this investigation down almost immediately. I think there was pressure from a higher up to keep that investigation going. Now, that is kind of speculation. It's kind of not. In fact, we know... I don't know what happened. We do know some things. We know that the unmasking occurred. We know that Barack Obama himself, or at least I have heard on the media, or in the media, that Barack Obama himself had requested the unmasking. And you know what? I'm going to do another video here in a few minutes that talks about how unreliable the media is, because that's a huge topic. Anyway, we really, the thing is, it's hard to say we know anything, because all the information we've obtained is through the media. And, we know, for instance, we know now that the media has been lying to us for years. MSNBC, for instance, has been going off on this Russia investigation for 2 years, completely fabricating everything they've been saying. And everything is hyperbole, of course, because I'm sure there were 1 or 2 facts in there. But they have been fabricating the vast majority of their quote-unquote news. So we know we can't trust them. We know we can't trust CNN. As it turns out, Fox News seems to have been right on this particular issue. But that's just because it broke their way. I don't necessarily think their investigative reporting is that much better than anybody else's. I don't think they're that much more above the fray or committed to truth. And maybe they are. I could be wrong. But I'm going to do a video here in a second that's going to explain why I am extremely skeptical of almost all media outlets across the board. And it's not just, Fox News. It's not just MSNBC and CNN. It's like, Vox. It's the Washington Times, the New York Times, WAPO. They all are being written by people. And I got to tell you, people make some really crazy mistakes, and I don't know, what would you call an intentional mistake? I mean, it's not just, they fabricate the news in many situations. But Trump is innocent, and we need to get our system back to where people are innocent until proven guilty. And I say he's innocent not because he's never done anything wrong. He's just not, we have not found that he is guilty of any of these things. It is ridiculous that in the part 2 of the Mueller memo, they come out and say that we couldn't exonerate him, so throw our hands up in the air. Well, it's not really your job to exonerate him. Could you find evidence of anything? No. Do you have? Would you? You could even make the claim, well, if he wasn't president, we would have charged him with this. You could have said that in the memo. They didn't say anything. So they just said, well, we couldn't reach a decision. But even on that, the president is in charge of the executive branch. That's why you can't charge him with a crime for exercising his executive authority. All right. I've rambled on this particular topic enough, so I'll go ahead and let you guys talk it out in the comments. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I think. I'd like to keep this conversation going, so go ahead and put your comments down below, and then like, subscribe, and share the video, please. Your support is appreciated, and follow me at xverum on Twitter. You guys have a great day, and see you next time.